So Laksh, you're mentioning that there are few more examples from the tech world that you would like to share.
Yeah,
Let's have a go at them.
sure. So this is again from the perspective of systems thinking, bringing that psychology aspects into our decision making. And so let me start with a couple of examples. This is something that I call as Silicon Valley syndrome, wherein we try to quantify something and look at it objectively, quantify it, and see, hey, if we can automate that, then our job here is done. A simple example here is a doorman at a hotel, right? And so you look at the doorman, okay, what the job of a doorman is to open doors. So let me actually replace that. How much does a doorman cost? Plus, insurance, benefits, what have you. Let me replace that with an automated door for like 10,000 bucks. And boom, we've just improved our bottom line by $50,000 or whatever. And what we're missing there is the context. A doorman is not just a doorman. He greets regular guests by name. There's a familiarity there. He provides a sense of security, and he carries your luggage. He hails taxi cabs for you. And heck, you cannot charge $200 for that hotel if you don't have a doorman, right? Fast forward 1 year, the whole hotel is wrecked. Guests are not coming back. There's no sense of security, and so on and so forth. And so this is a big bias within mainstream management, like just trying to quantify things and trying to optimize things that we can quantify. Just tying that back to the example that I gave about the Eurostar is time traveled. There's a SI unit for it, which is seconds and minutes. You can quantify that, but boredom cannot be quantified. There are no SI units for it. And so we completely ignore that. And so the fundamental issue here is it goes all the way back to Aristotle. And Aristotle said there are two distinctive parts of the world. And both of those parts require fundamentally different approaches. And the first part is, I think he called it as the part of the world where things cannot be other than they are. A good example would be like, I have a glass here. If I drop this glass, what's going to happen? It's going to fall. I'm sitting here in the Bay Area. It's the same results. We do it in Bengaluru. It's going to be the same result. I do it 50 years ago. It's going to be the same result. And I do it 100 years from now. It's going to be the same result across space and time. It doesn't change. But the other part of the world where things can be other than they are, we must use imagination. You cannot use science there. And that's the key aspect that I want to focus on. So coming to tech examples, let's take the example of Uber. You cannot solve the problem of getting a car to you ASAP easily, because there's just way too many factors. Outside, the car could break down, there could be a traffic jam, and so on and so forth. And so what Uber did is clearly, whether they realize it or not, it's a psychological benefit. Humans are really, really uncomfortable with uncertainty. And we try to remove uncertainty as much as we can from our existence. Time and time again, there are many studies that show that what really improved passenger satisfaction in the London railway network is not, better trains, faster trains, wider tracks. None of that. Pound for pound, what really improved passenger satisfaction was a dot matrix display in the platform that shows the ETA of the next train. Like when there's a countdown timer, people are happy to wait even 9 minutes, 10 minutes when they know when the next train is coming. But if you're waiting even for 5 minutes with uncertainty, that's hell. And so what Uber really did there was, you open up the app, you're going to see exactly when you can get the next car, like 14 minutes, 5 minutes, and shows the car in the map. Remove uncertainty. But once you book it, again, it'll show you an estimate, but then it's not going to be always accurate, but it's remove the uncertainty. So you don't have to, hey, I'm in a bar. Oh, it's going to take 10 more minutes. Let me have another beer, right? Then you walk out exactly to the door when the car gets to your place. And so removing that uncertainty is very, very important. And so how that ties to systems thinking is, this is a great story that Russell tells a long time ago about a skyscraper in New York City, I think right after the Second World War. And all of the residents, and again, it includes many businesses that own multiple floors, and all of them were complaining to the management of that building that, hey, look, it's taking a lot of time for the elevators to get to. If you don't fix that problem, we're just going to go to another skyscraper, another building. And so the management of that building, got everybody together, and they hired a consultant, and the consultant said, okay, we got to do a survey. First we need to understand what the problem is, right? And so they did the survey, and they came back after 2 weeks. Of course, you have to pay them to do the survey. They said, look, the average wait time is something like 2 minutes, and the average across America is 20 seconds. It's an old building, and so it's 6 times bad. And so how do we fix it? And so they said, okay, well, let's do an analysis there are a few options, right? You can upgrade to automated elevators. You can add more elevators. We have a few options, but we have to do a proper analysis. So they said, okay, you pay them, a couple $1 million. They come back with the analysis that, look, we have a problem. Because if you try to add new elevators, you have to demolish parts of the building, which you have rented out now. And so the economics of that doesn't work out. You cannot add new elevators. Switching out to automated elevators also only reduces it to about maybe 1 minute something, and it's still worse. And so they were pretty much left with no solutions. And so they got desperate. And so they called everybody who works at the building and said, look, we have a problem. We have a crisis. We don't have a problem. And throw out all ideas. And so finally, there was one intern or something like that who was very quiet. And the leader of that management of that building said, hey, why don't you give us your idea? He's like, no, if I give my ideas, it will be scrutinized and people will ridicule it. It's like, no, all ideas are valid. Go ahead. He said, look, instead of trying to objectively improve, I mean, not in so many words, the time duration, I think people are just bored waiting for elevators. What we should do is, he gave that idea, and it cost $500, and the problem was completely resolved. The idea was to install mirrors in the lobby of where the elevators are, and that's a standard practice now across, many countries. So people are just bored so that they can see each other and themselves while they're waiting. So you don't have to objectively improve the product. The traditional economic view is you have to objectively improve the product. And what I'm trying to say is you have to focus on the human aspect of uncertainty, boredom, frustration, things like that. And how that translates to software companies in the tech world is, let me all kind of bring it back together, is say we want to improve productivity, right? Let's set aside the fact that productivity by itself is not an end. It's a means to an end, which is, are we delivering value to the customer? But leaving that aside, we tend to focus on things that can be quantified, like build duration, time it takes after you commit the code to when it can hit production. Like we try to quantify it and try to improve it and things like that. But we completely ignore the human aspects, the psychological aspects of frustration. Like a great example of that would be during ideation phase. In a large corporation, you can imagine having to go and articulate your idea to finance to get budgets, to privacy, to compliance, to InfoSec, and multiple different organizations, explaining and getting their approvals before you can launch. that's like a death by 1,000 cuts. And so it really stifles creativity and innovation, and we ignore that. We say, hey, that's how things work, and we've done it always like that, and we're going to continue to do that, and we fail to reimagine a new system wherein we can improve that. And so let me wrap by condensing this into, we're all, we all studied science at school, and so we're so logical and rational. And so what I would say is, don't just be logical and ignore the psychological aspects at play. Don't ignore the magic because you have logic. Russell-Ackoff, again, reiterating Russell-Ackoff, is systems thinking not only erases the boundaries between the points of view that define the sciences and the professions, it also erases the boundary between science and the humanities. So bring that together, and you have something that's truly magical. And I think, given that, I strongly believe the revolutions of the 21st century are going to be psychological, not logical. Not technological, rather. Yeah.
Very profound words there, Laksh. In fact, such wonderful the examples that you shared from Rory Sutherland, and these couple of examples of Uber and the other thing. Interesting that you mentioned a bunch of things that's coming back again and again to me as I'm listening to you. One is complexity is a description by the observer. Mm-hmm. And as I am sensing the system, I am a context also, and there's a lot happening inside of me with my biases and habits that's also framing, even this conversation in that sense. Yeah. The second thing that you mentioned was there is some kind of juice in the quantifiable, articulatable, exchangeable, expressible, but that's not all. And there are aspects that are meshed with the opposites of this, and we should not lose sight of them, and often also look at experiments around, or asking deeper questions around the others. And that's where psychological and social systems or social conversations would be a better approach, or a slightly more prudent approach. Curiosity that comes to me, Laksh, is, and this ties back to a comment that you made. This is not mainstream yet. Russell-Ackoff was there, he's been talking about this for 30, 40, 50 years. And Ralph Stacey has been talking about this. What do you think are the headwinds to these things? I mean, one of the obvious things is the Wall Street, to some extent, if I understand it. The Wall Street.
Wall Street.
One of the headwinds is Wall Street, and the other headwind that I feel is it would demand individuals to make a different relationship with uncertainty, and be ready for failures and admitting failures, and the society's own relationship with the word and concept of failure. I mean, these are some things that come to me. Would this be incongruent to your own thinking, or there are additional things to this?
Yeah. Look, there are multiple headwinds. I think we discussed some of it earlier, which is like, we're all trained analytical thinkers. That also gets in the way, but it's not that difficult to teach systems thinking to kids. There have been experiments in the school level which have been very successful. I think there's also a YouTube video where Peter Senge talks about teaching systems thinking in schools and things like that. Kids get it. It's intuitive. But I think, like, just coming back to the current world, I think, at least in the context of a corporation, one thing I want to make sure is, within complex systems, you cannot ascertain specific cause and effect, which means you have to remove blame from the equation. You cannot simply blame Wall Street in isolation. You cannot simply blame executives in isolation, or leaders in isolation. what we're in is a mess, and how do we untangle that and manage that mess and dance with complexity is what we should focus on. Having said that, I think personally, what gets in the way of learning systems thinking and understanding this, becoming more humble, is what really gets in the way is ego. And what is truly needed is epistemic humility. That what you know, like how do you know what you know is true? What do you know is right? Having that epistemic humility and then focusing on learning is a big headwind. Executives are very busy reacting to events on an everyday basis, and getting them to take a break for a couple of weeks and go through a complete transformation, like an experiential training or a workshop, and then taking those insights and applying them and reimagining their corporation from the ground up is a hard call. And so I may be a little bit pessimistic in saying that maybe, I don't know if it was which scientist it was Polly or somebody else that said that, look, new scientific theories don't progress by convincing the old folks. What really happens is they just die out. The opponents just die out. And so there's always an evolutionary elimination that happens. And so the corporations that don't embrace this new paradigm shift of systems thinking and complexity and cybernetics and whatnot will eventually disappear, and the ones that do will survive the complexity of the 21st century. It's a very pessimistic view, but I am also an optimist in real life, and so I strongly believe that that we can improve our current situation, and we gotta start having those conversations. And LinkedIn has been an amazing public town square where we're having those conversations, and the word is spreading, and I can already see the change happening across multiple corporations.
Interesting, Laksh. Given that there are these, so one thing which I wanted to just understand it a little better. When you frame it, I agree that we'll have to remove blame from the equation. And then when you say that Wall Street may not be, because Wall Street exists in a context, right? Wall Street is not isolated. There are political, there are social, cultural kind of things, and that gives rise to the emergence of Wall Street in some sense. And similarly, let's say leaders. But I do not know how to wrap my head around that there are definitely certain things or phenomena or people who definitely have far more power over what happens in a system than the other actors in the system.
Yeah. Yes.
And if there is a shift in those power centers, the system could move, could become a little more, the dance could become faster and better, is how I see it. You would agree to that?
Absolutely. Look, if a corporation is shackled by Taylorism, the best lever to pull is the leader unshackling it. But the first step of that transformation of the corporation is the transformation of the leader himself or herself. Having that epistemic humility, letting go of ego, and saying, okay, everything that I've learned about leadership so far is wrong. And trying to unlearn things. Unlearning is a key part of learning, and learn new things and try and go and experiment with reimagining the corporation in a different way. And you know, complex systems require oblique interventions. You cannot seek things directly, right? Like the problem with Wall Street is that, you know, they seek profits quarter over quarter, increase in profits, revenue, and of course, which in turn results in better shareholder value, is the argument. But if you seek profit directly, it may not be sustainable. It will not be sustainable. And so there are multiple case studies, like, for example, Alcoa, Paul O'Neill is a case study. We can link that case study to the viewers. What Paul O'Neill did was he completely, at his first press meet as the CEO. He said, the company is suffering, the profits have been declining. He said that, look, my focus is going to be on the safety of the workers, right? That stock tanked right after that very first meeting. But the board kind of knew what he was up to. And so they supported him, and the workers supported him. And over a period of time, just by focusing on safety, what really ended up was the company revenue went up, the profit went up, and so on and so forth. And this is what Deming also taught, is that, hey, focus on quality. When you focus on quality, then that Deming chain reaction results in fewer errors, better ways to get things done, and so on, and eventually more jobs and more profit. And so every leader has to come up with, hey, what is this oblique intervention that I'm going to do in this complex system, so that we can inspire people to do the right things for our customers and our overall ecosystem.
Interesting. In fact, when you mentioned the concepts or the constructs of safety and quality, I believe that they're not easily graspable, and you need to do while there are markers to say whether something is safer than the other. There are no absolute markers in that sense. I mean, it's my understanding.
Look, it's people are inspired towards those qualitative things rather than quantitative things. Like, try inspiring a corporation of 100,000 workers, saying that, look, we're going to hit 50 million profit next quarter. Let's go. It's not going to inspire anybody. But even if it's unquantifiable, when we say that we're going to make the safety of workers better, and there is a way to, you can try and track it. You can say,
accidents.
People where injuries and things like that should go down eventually, right? And after a certain point, it really becomes what we call as culture of the organization, right? And so any improvements to improving the safety of the workers, what Paul O'Neill did was he removed financial shackles. He said, no budget constraints. If you think that's the right thing to do, and if you can come up with a good explanation and convince, then they just go ahead and do it, no constraints. And so he really took it serious. And of course, he made a ton of mistakes. He didn't, obviously it's a journey for everybody. And it's okay to have unquantifiable things. Many times what you aspire for is unaccomplishable. Google says they want to organize all the information on the world. No, you're not going to be able to do that. It's an unaccomplishable ideal. And so it's more about the journey than the real destination.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I was trying to build on was exactly what you said, with the following, that because it does not have the momentum of our analytical logical thinking that we are so used to, and because it doesn't give you a grasp of measurability so much, which means you have to essentially work with the wild in some sense, and then that requires a very different kind of, as you said, I mean, taming of the ego, our relationship with how we see things as experiments versus failures, and sort of thing. How important, Laksh, you think then is, and I'm just assuming that you would think that the inner development of an individual, simultaneous or precedent to the outer changes, is as important?
I'm not sure what do you mean by outer changes.
So so what I mean by inner is my own metacognition, emotional intelligence, spiritual journey, cosmological, reflections, and how it's presenting itself even in this conversation, in the next word, in the next sentence, and to the feedbacks that I'm getting through your gestures and your words. While in some dualistic sense this is coming from the outside, but it's my ability to create this, to work with this vessel and instrument, and developing it alongside or precedent is as important as what I feel. Would you agree to that?
Look, one of the insights from second order cybernetics is that we're informationally closed beings. What that means is information cannot just enter into us directly. What the environment does is it can only perturb our senses, right? Whether it's a beam of white light that is hitting your neurons or a drop of vinegar that's hitting your neurons, both will be perceived as white light. Neurons only tell you that they've been tickled. It cannot tell you what tickled it. And we then make sense of it based on our existing internal structure, like what evolution gave us. That journey starts from a child. As you're born, you make sense of your environment and you figure things out. And so trying to separate that is not possible, right? Your knowledge is embodied. And so as you develop, the way you develop and learn is by actioning, right? You touch the fire and you learn the lesson that you're not supposed to touch the fire again. And so thinking and acting cannot be separate. It's akin to having a separate person responsible for strategy in a corporation. Oh, that person and that team will do all the strategy, and here is the set of people who do the execution. No, you cannot separate that out. It has to be together. And so as you do it, that in turn influences what you think. That in turn changes you internally, and that in turn changes your actions. And so that's a loop that goes on continuously.
Maybe what I was trying to get at, Laksh, is to the extent that words are allowing me to frame it, so I'm just calling it as outside and inside, knowing fully or realizing fully that it's just an exchange, interactions happening at different levels inside. Again, the word inside and outside, or everywhere, let's say. In that sense, there is definitely a first-person experience that I have, that the day I meditate, the day I walk, the day I do yoga, the day I do a little bit of scribbles, my ability to participate in activities and interactions are texturally different than when I don't do it. Which tells me that if I do these practices, my ability to be open to criticism, disagreements, or emergence of a new idea or insight is different.
Yeah.
And that would lend itself differently to handle even complexity inside and outside. So I would say that complexity is inside and outside. Again, inside, outside is just a framing part of it. Hemant is talking to Laksh right now.
Yeah.
In some sense, Hemant is somewhere different to Laksh. At some level, we are the same. At some level, we are different. And now we are exchanging some things. But if I ask myself this question, Hemant is interacting with Laksh. What is really happening? And then I say that I think, I feel, I say, I do. I'm a thinking, feeling, saying, doing species. And there is a way in which thinking is different and feeling is different. In the sense, I can improve or change my thinking, or at least attempt or create conditions for that. Similarly, if emotions rise and fall, if I'm aware, I can manage them even in this conversation.
Yes.
Right? So there is a way in which when I work on my own self, on my thinking, feeling, saying, and doing, my ability to deal with complexity inside and outside is slightly different. Which is what I'm calling as inner development.
Yes.
Preceding or simultaneous to outer perturbations or interactions that we want to do.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Look, the transformation or the development that happens is truly internal, using your own words. Because look, all the external environment, including me, can do is only perturb you. What really happens is inside your brain, inside your embodied mind. And so as that changes, and I would highly recommend that we deeply self-reflect on what we do and how we think, what we know true, what is knowledge, and constantly, being that self-reflexive is very key. Without that, the external change is not going to happen anyway. And so I think we hinted upon those things in the past, like it's the listener that determines the meaning of an utterance. And so whatever I say, you then look at it, you hear it. But then when you go back and think deeply about it, maybe that gives you a completely different insight, and you go and do another beautiful scribble of yours on LinkedIn. And so the change is definitely on the inside, which then modifies our actions. And so there is no substitute for conversations. I strongly believe that driving transformation is all about changing our own mental models, having conversations. And that's all there is to it. When we say system, when I say systems within quotes, it is that system is not something that's out there, but what you think as the system inside your head. There's a lot of assumptions between, like when somebody says, I remember I think it was like the first week I landed in the US back in 2006. I was in Phoenix, Arizona. I was waiting at a bus station. Like one of the persons waiting with me, one of the locals said, "Oh, the transportation system here is screwed up." It's like, okay, I thought it was like, okay, he's talking about the whole system. But all he meant was my bus is usually late by 5 minutes, right? Your system and my system are completely different. Where you draw the boundary of what your system is, what your set of values are completely different. And so having that conversation and doing that, boundary critique and figuring out what our values are, I think that is what truly results in transformations. And so there is no substitute for conversations.
Thanks. Laksh, this has been a wonderful, wonderful exchange. And I wish that we get time in future to have more of such dialogues and manthan or, constructive build-up to synthesis, as you said. I look forward to some of them. And any last words you would like to share that we may have missed out, or it's coming up for you right now?
First up, thank you for having me on, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I would be happy to do one more or multiple sessions in the future. I would say that we're at a juncture where we have to seriously introspect and look at our mental models of how we think the world works. Or if you want to draw the system boundary to a corporation from a leadership standpoint, which is what I'm super passionate about, and I blog about it regularly on LinkedIn. I think we're at a cusp of a paradigm shift that's going to happen. And I would say that this is not just about management and leadership. Systems thinking profoundly changed me as a person, as a human, as a parent. And thinking is thinking, and it can be applied to any domain. I wish more of us joined us in our journey together. And thank you for all the engagement that you have on LinkedIn and off LinkedIn. I truly value these relationships.
Thank you so much, Laksh. Thank you so much for your presence, and we look forward for more.